We've all heard the stories about the epic Battle of Kulikovo in 1380, right? It's one of those huge, defining moments in Russian history. But what if I told you the real story started 2 years earlier? Today, we're diving into a battle you might not know, the Battle of the Vozha River. Think of it as the crucial dress rehearsal that made everything else possible.
For more than a century, the Golden Horde was seen as, well, invincible, an absolute force of nature that held the Russian principalities in its grip. But on one summer day in 1378, that entire myth just crumbled. This isn't just a story about tactics and armies. It's about the exact moment a people realized, hey, we can actually fight back. And to get that, we need to see who was in the ring.
All right, so to really get why this battle was such a big deal, we have to look at the two powers that were on a collision course. Because in the late 14th century, the whole map of Eastern Europe was changing. The old guard was starting to stumble, and a new contender was ready to step up.
You see, the Golden Horde wasn't the unified juggernaut it used to be. Not even close. It was deep in a period historians call the Great Troubles, and that's putting it mildly. Get this, in just over 20 years, more than 24 different Khans sat on the throne. The empire was literally tearing itself apart from the inside out.
And this contrast is everything. On one side, you have the Horde, led by a commander named Mamai. Now, he was powerful, for sure, but he wasn't a direct descendant of Genghis Khan. This meant he had to rule through puppet Khans, which made his grip on power kind of shaky. On the other side, you've got the Principality of Moscow, under the very ambitious Prince Dmitry Ivanovich. While the Horde was breaking apart, Dmitry was doing the exact opposite. He was pulling the Russian lands together, getting rich, and building a seriously organized army. You can just feel the balance of power shifting, can't you?
You know how this story goes, right? A rising power and a declining one. They can only circle each other for so long. A few bold moves here, an angry response there, and suddenly that tense standoff was about to become an all-out war. It was just a matter of when.
And this fire didn't start overnight. The fuse was really lit back in 1374 when Dmitry did something incredibly risky. He just stopped paying tribute to Mamai, a huge slap in the face to the Horde's authority. Well, Mamai wasn't going to let that go. In 1377, he sent a message, crushing a Russian army at the Piana River. But Dmitry didn't back down, and that forced Mamai's hand. In 1378, he sent in the big guns, a massive army under a top general, Mirza Begich, with one simple order: crush Moscow.
And you have to understand, that decision was historic. Before this moment, the Russian principalities had never ever won a major battle in an open field against the large Horde army. All their previous wins were small skirmishes. Every big showdown had ended in defeat. The Battle of the Vozha River was about to change absolutely everything.
Now, Prince Dmitry was no fool. He knew he couldn't just go head-to-head with the Horde's famous cavalry out in the open. That would be suicide. No, he needed an edge, and he found it on the banks of the Vozha River, where he was about to set a brilliant trap that was all about brains over brawn.
So, let's talk numbers. The Russian army was a coalition, a mix of forces from different principalities, all fighting under Moscow's banner. We don't have exact figures, but most historians put their strength somewhere in the ballpark of 5,000 to 15,000 men. A good-sized army, but probably smaller than what was headed their way.
Now, the army Mamai sent, whoa, this was a massive expedition. Again, the numbers are debated, but some sources say it was anywhere from 10,000 to a staggering 50,000 warriors. Whatever the real number was, their commander, Mirza Begich, was feeling pretty confident he could just sweep the Russians away.
And this is super important. Dmitry didn't just show up with a disorganized mob. He had a solid command structure. He himself took command of the center, the most vital spot. He put trusted, experienced guys on his flanks, like Timofey Vilyaminov and Andrei of Polaks. This meant his army could move and react as one single coordinated machine.
Okay, so the stage is set. It's August 11th, 1378. For days, these two armies just stared at each other across the water. The Tatars were probing, looking for a good place to cross and unleash that famous cavalry charge. The Russians, they were just waiting for the enemy to walk right into their trap.
Dmitry's plan was, honestly, a work of art. Let's break it down. First, his scouts were amazing. They figured out the exact spot the Horde was planning to cross. Second, he used the terrain perfectly, blocking that crossing and setting up his army on a hill overlooking it. Third, he arranged his men in a crescent or a bow shape, designed to soak up the initial charge. Then, and here's the genius part, he faked a slight retreat, making it look like his army was losing its nerve. This was the bait. Finally,
Once the Horde cavalry was stuck, crossing the river and charging uphill, he'd spring the trap with a massive, three-pronged counterattack.
And Bigich? He fell for it. Hook, line, and sinker. He saw the Russians pulling back and thought, this is it, they're scared. He ordered a full-scale charge across the river and up the hill. For the Horde, this was textbook, a fast, brutal assault to shatter the enemy's spirit.
But the Russian line didn't break. Not this time. Imagine the scene. The Tatar cavalry, exhausted from swimming across the river and charging uphill, slams into a solid wall of Russian spears and shields, all their momentum gone. And right at that perfect moment of weakness, Dmitry gave the signal.
The Russian center surged forward, and at the same time, the flank regiments smashed into them from both sides. The Horde's forces were caught, completely boxed in, and they just shattered. Panic set in. What started as a proud charge turned into a desperate retreat. And that river they had just crossed, it was now a death trap. Caught between the charging Russians and the deep water, thousands were killed or drowned. As night fell, the fighting was over. The field belonged to Dmitry. But the real story, the true impact of this victory, was just getting started. Its effects would ripple out far beyond this one riverbank and change the course of history.
I mean, just look at the scoreboard here. The results were absolutely brutal for the Horde. Russian losses were light. For the Golden Horde, it was a complete catastrophe. Their army wasn't just defeated, it was annihilated. And even worse, their entire command structure was wiped out. Their top general, Mirza Bigich, was dead, along with a ton of other high-ranking nobles and commanders. You don't just lose a battle like this, you lose a whole generation of leaders.
But honestly, the biggest damage wasn't even on the battlefield. It was psychological. This victory proved, for the first time, that the legendary Tatar cavalry could be stopped. It gave the Russian princes a massive shot of confidence. It showed them that, with the right leadership and strategy, the Horde was not invincible. This encouraged other princes to rally behind Moscow. And of course, it made Mamai absolutely furious. This was a humiliation he simply could not let stand.
And that right there is the key takeaway. The Battle of the Vozha River was the essential dress rehearsal for Kulikovo. It's where Dmitry tested his tactics, where his army proved it could win, and where he built the coalition he'd need for the even bigger fight 2 years later. Without the confidence and the hard-won experience from Vozha, the legendary victory at Kulikovo might never have happened at all.
The Battle of the Vozha River is such a great reminder that history doesn't always turn on the biggest, most famous events. Sometimes, it turns on those key moments that change what people believe is possible. This was the first punch that proved the giant could bleed, and in doing so, it set a nation on the very long, very difficult road to freedom.